In this tutorial we're going to be looking at making a cartoon style tree just by using some cubes. When you first load up Blender, you're probably going to see a splash screen like this one here. We're going to click to the side of it and that reveals our 3D viewport. In this 3D viewport is where we're going to be setting up our scene. We're going to be checking where the camera is, where the lighting is, and of course turning this middle cube into a tree. At the moment it doesn't look very much like a tree. We're going to get there though. So we've got the cube in the center, we're turning into a tree. Up to the top right of it is a light source which is going to be shining down on it at the moment. We can move that later if you want to. And the left hand side we have our camera, and again we can move this, but you can see that it's looking onto it and we would expect light to be coming from the top right. And to test that this is the case, we can press F12 on our keyboard, and that will allow us to actually see what the camera sees, because that's what we're going to be using for our final work. So F12 shows me that we have a cube in the center with some lights coming from the top right hand side. Hit escape to get out of this view and we're back into editing. So in our 3D viewport now we've also got one last thing I want to show you, which is the ability to zoom in using the mouse wheel. We can zoom in and we can zoom out, and if you hold the mouse wheel down, or you have a third button on your mouse, pressing that down, holding it down, we can actually rotate around our whole shot to check that everything looks okay. And that's looking okay so far. So what do we need to do now? Well, I need to turn this into a tree, and as you can probably tell, it doesn't look particularly tree-like at the moment. I need to shrink this down. I'm going to turn this part into the trunk of the tree. Down here in this little panel we've got 5 different things. I'm interested in the middle 3 at the moment. I have an arrow which allows me to move things. Okay, so I'm moving this cube now, and I would expect if I move it there, well, we were looking at the cube there before, so we're just going to see the edge maybe, or it's definitely moved to the right of the shot. Let's hit F12. You can see I've moved the cube. So that allows me to move it by using these arrows. And what else we can do is we can actually click on the square shaped one, which is scale. It allows us to resize this cube. If I click on scale, notice the arrows have turned into kind of blocks, almost they may look like spheres on your computer depending how good your resolution is. So these little blocks on the end instead of the arrows will allow us to squeeze, squash or stretch this cube. So I'm going to stretch this cube, sorry, squeeze this cube into the shape of a tree trunk. So let's go for the green one here. Let's just make it nice and thin, and then the red one again nice and thin. Okay, and then the blue one allows me to actually stretch it slightly, and if I use my middle mouse button I can rotate around there. Now that's looking a bit more like a tree trunk, and F12 will check. Okay, we've got a tree trunk there. Now we need to add some leaves, some foliage to the top of this. And to add the foliage, what we're going to do is we're going to actually create some more cubes and stick them all together on top of this tree. So on the left hand side in this panel we have a create tool, and the create tool allows me to create a cube. So if I click on create cube, well, I have another cube there. It's nice and big, and I've still got these tools here to resize it if I want to. I don't want to resize it at the moment. What I want to do is I want to move it to the top of the tree. So let's go back to the arrow tool and let's just drag that up here to the top of the tree. And if I go to F12, it's okay, but it looks a bit like a lollipop. Maybe you want to have something a bit more complicated. So let's see what we can do with this. Hit escape. So we're now going to add a couple more cubes. We're going to resize them and we're going to scatter them at the top of this tree. So let's, for our cube there, it's a bit big as well for this tree, so I'm going to resize it. Now you could go to this resize tool, the scale tool, or if you wanted to, you could just press the S key on your keyboard, or size. Click on S, and if I move my mouse it allows me to shrink that cube down very slightly, and I press, let's just do it one more time, I press left mouse button to actually keep what I want. So I'm going to keep it that size, left mouse button, there we go. It's a little bit smaller than what it was. Let's add another one. So we're going to create cube, there's another cube there. Again I'm going to resize this like so, maybe a little bit smaller than that, and I'm going to move it up by going to the arrow here, and there's my my cube starting to stick out the side there, and I'm going to add one more cube over here, create cube, move that up there. I'm going to make that a bit smaller by pressing S on my keyboard, shrinking it down like that, and then just moving that across and up. So that's a bit more tree-like, a bit more kind of cartoony tree-like. What I may want to do is I may want to mix things up slightly. So we've been able to move, we've been able to resize, and the other thing we need to do, this middle tool, is going to allow us to rotate. So if I click on this curved shape, I get another interface on my objects which allow me to rotate these cubes. So hitting the red one there, I'm going to rotate that one there. Click on the next one by right click selecting it. There's a bit of a rotation there, and let's have a bit of a rotation there. I'm not very keen on that one. Let's see what I can do with that. There we go, we'll add that there. And that's kind of getting to the style I'm looking for. And if you do want to rotate, you can also hit the R key as well. That allows you to rotate. So let's just leave that there. Now I've got a problem though, because as you can see, they're sticking out the sides, and that's not the view I'm going for. If I go to F12, it's going to look a little bit messy. Yeah, that's a bit messy. What I need to do is probably move some of these cubes just to make sure that we don't have any edges sticking through other objects. So back to our movement key here. Click on that. I'm going to move him to the side slightly there. I'm going to tick this one here, move that to the slightly there, and then let's go to F12, and we have something resembling a 3D tree. It's getting there. Maybe a bit more work and probably a bit more colour, but there we are. We have our 3D tree to get started with.